Hello everyone, welcome to the final rankings video of the first part of the season at least. Today we're going to be doing the linebackers. If anybody has any questions about start or bench questions, if you don't know which player to start or heads or tails of something like that, or you just have a question about, my advice for your team in general, let me know. I might make a video on it since we're kind of out of stuff to do for the rankings videos. I have one video in mind for what we can do as well. But I hope you enjoy this linebacker one for now. To kick things off, number 12, we have J-Bay. J-Bay has Nick Bellore, who's basically Jesus himself, Sam Kamara, and Jake Gervais. Yeah, I don't think any of these guys are even on a starting team anymore, or not even on a team in general anymore. It says Nick Bellore's technically not inactive, so he might be buried on the depth chart. So, yeah, it's dog shit. It's about the best you can get. Coming in at number 11, I have Booty Basher. Booty Basher has Drew Tranquill, Samson Ebukam, and Frank Clark. Now, to start things off, Samson Ebukam I don't even think is starting this year. I think he's benched. Frank Clark, even though he's projected 0 points, that's not really much to worry about. He is going to be getting the starting. He's going to be starting for Denver. I don't think he'll put up nearly as many points as most linebackers, though. He'll be putting up more like defensive line points because he is a defensive end in real life. I have no idea why Yahoo has him considered as a linebacker, but oh well. Drew Tranquill, he did really, really good for the Chargers last year. However, he is going on to a Chiefs team that has Nick Bolton and a lot of other guys that will be taking away his tackles, and that's if he plays a lot of snaps. But overall, he's not going to have nearly the season he had last year unless Nick Bolton goes down. But at least you have a few linebackers that'll score you points, unlike Mosto or J-Bay. So I got you ranked a little bit higher than them. Coming in at number 10, and it's that time again. There's three things that are promised in life: death, taxes, and MILF finishing in the bottom 5. So here we go. We got MILF coming up at number 10. He has Marcus Davenport and Cody Barton. Now, Cody Barton did really good last year in terms of fantasy. Whenever he was playing for Seattle, and both Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner were gone. Bobby Wagner was on the Rams last year, mind you. Um, Overall, he was really good. Now he's on Washington. Cole Holcomb left that team, and he's the replacement for him. I think he won't do as good as Holcomb did, but he does have the upside of Holcomb. Now, if you've ever watched this Cody Barton play in real life, you know he's probably one of the worst linebackers in the league. He's very slow. He doesn't read plays properly. A lot of his tackles come from him allowing free catches. Overall, he's not a good linebacker in real life, so I could see them benching him by some point in the season. I don't know for sure about that, though. Either way, he's not good. And you also have Marcus Davenport, who would be solid for a defensive lineman. I'm not going to lie. He actually has some upside as a defensive lineman, could be good. But for a linebacker, it'll be rare he puts up numbers compared to a lot of the linebackers you can find even on free agency. But overall, at least you have Cody Barton and Davenport putting up good amount of points. I think they'll just beat out the guys Booty had. And overall, I got you at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Karen's husband. Karen's husband has Isaiah Simmons, Matt Milano, and Alex Anzalone. Now, Matt Milano, I love him as a linebacker. I think for getting him as late as you did, I think getting him off of free agency and all that, he could actually be a very good pickup. I think he might be one of the upsided linebackers in the league this year because, as some of you know, Tremaine Edmonds went to the Bears from the Bills. So I could actually see this Matt Milano taking over as the linebacking core and taking over and becoming the main tackler for this Bills defense. So I think he actually has a lot of upside. But that's about where your upside ends. Alex Anzalone did okay for fantasy linebackers last year, but now Detroit signed a rookie last year or in the draft. I think his name is Jack Campbell, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I don't see Anzalone having nearly as good of a year as he did last year just because of Jack Campbell coming on in. So I don't really think he has much upside. I think he's going to be okay at best for you, but I think he'll be on the lower scale of the linebackers no matter what, even at his peak this year. Isaiah Simmons is actually really solid for safety this year, But for a linebacker, I don't think he'll get many points compared to most other linebackers in the league. You can tell with like the projections. Even a guy like Alex Anzalone, for example, is projected 3 more points than Simmons, and you can see that with most safeties. Safeties usually don't score as many as linebackers unless you get one of the elite ones. But overall, I would say he helps you more in the safety thing. If I were you, I would honestly bench that Davis guy for Simmons, and then pick up another linebacker or something like that. But overall, at least you have some solid guys, and then you also have Simmons who you got playing as well. So you got 3 options that will at least be scoring points for you. Coming in at number 8, I think this is the worst linebacking core in terms of the guys that are fully picked up. What I mean by that is like not a bunch of scrubs and people that aren't even going to be playing. I have Toxic Zenpai at number 8. He has Jamin Davis, David Long, Frankie Louvu, and Jerome Baker. Now, Frankie Louvu is pretty hit or miss. I think he might be on crack, and I'm not even joking when I say that. I think he is, because he'll go from scoring 30 points in a game to scoring like 2. I don't know how he manages it. It just is a week by week basis. He just randomly chooses if he's going to do good or not. So overall, that's kind of risky on your end, but to each their own. Maybe he'll be more consistent this year. Maybe he'll be less consistent. Who knows? You have Jerome Baker, who should be pretty consistent for you. I think he'll be a solid linebacker. I don't think he'll be bad. I think there's a lot of better linebackers out there, but he won't necessarily be bad. Jamin Davis, I think he'll be a little bit better than he was last year, just because, as you saw with Cody Barton replacing Cool Holcomb, I think Cody Barton is a lot slower in a lot of scenarios. So I think Jamin Davis might actually do a little bit better than last year, but overall not too crazy much better. Um, and then this is something I actually don't like about your linebacking core. You have David Long, who was solid for you last year, don't get me wrong, but it's usually not great to have 2 linebackers, especially middle linebackers, on the same team. Because keep in mind, these are the guys that'll be getting the tackles on one team. You usually want to get a linebacker for multiple teams or a maiden linebacker for multiple teams who's going to be racking up the tackles for a majority of their team. Usually 2 middle linebackers on one team don't work out too well. Overall, I think Jerome Baker's going to get the majority of the points, but overall, they're kind of shooting each other in the foot every play. I didn't really want to count Brian Burns as a linebacker, and even if I did, it's the same thing as Isaiah Simmons, where he would be a lot more valuable as a defensive lineman. Like, he's one of the top defensive linemen in the entire fantasy league. But in terms of a linebacker, he still wouldn't be great. Like, I do not see a scenario where I'd ever start him as a linebacker if I were you. I would always keep him in at D-line. Coming in at number 7, we have Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled. Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled has Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Quay Walker, Pete Werner, the rookie Jack Campbell that I was just talking about, and Shaq Thompson. Now, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was kind of like that Frankie Louvu last year, where he would do really good or really bad depending on the week, and he would just kind of coin flip how he was going to do based on the week. Quay Walker, I don't think will be nearly as good as he's been in years past, just because of Devon J. Campbell potentially coming in and staying healthy. And what I mean by years past is last year, pretty much. But overall, I don't think he'll do as good as he did in years past, just because of that. Um, Jack Campbell's coming in. He is a rookie. He has a lot of upside, but he would pretty much need to outplay Anzalone to get it, or to get most of the defensive points in terms of fantasy, which is very possible. I don't remember what round they took him in, but it's very possible. Anzalone is not a good linebacker, so it's very possible. Pete Werner suffers from the same issue that Quay Walker has, where he was really good last year, but he's probably going to fall back because the Saints will probably be getting a healthy Demario Davis back, and as soon as he comes back, most of Werner's tackles will probably just go bye-bye. Shaq Thompson, honestly, if I were you, I would start Shaq Thompson over Jack Campbell, at least for week 1, until you know what you're going to get out of him. Shaq Thompson will probably be a consistent 10 or so points, maybe a bit more or less. But overall, I think he'll be a little bit. I think Shaq Thompson will be about the middle of the pack. He'll be a solid plug and play if you ever need a backup. But for week 1, I would recommend putting in Shaq Thompson. He'll probably be a lot more consistent until you know what you're working with Campbell. Coming in at number 6, we have Mr. Steeler Girl. This is where we're at the direct middle of the pack of the linebackers. He has Jermaine Edmonds, TJ Watt, and Micah Parsons. If this was real life, you might be number one. These linebackers are all very good in terms of real life. Um, in terms of fantasy, though, Edmonds is going from a Buffalo team to a Chicago team. I'm not too big on Edmonds just because the Bears, not only did they get Edmonds, they also got TJ Edwards, and they're also going to be using what's his name? Alex Sanborn. So, or no, Jack Sanborn, my bad. They're going to be using Jack Sanborn, so they're going to be using three linebackers that are just tackle hogs. So it's going to be hard for Edmonds to get as many points, but he does have that upside of being like Roquan Smith whenever he used to play for Chicago. Micah Parsons and TJ Watt are huge boomer bust players. I think Watt is usually a lot safer than Parsons is because usually, here's the thing, Watt is usually consistent for a good sack or so per game. Sometimes he has bigger games, but they're not as common. Micah Parsons is usually completely boomer bust. Usually he'll get like 3 sacks plus per game or he'll get nothing. And that's kind of just how Micah Parsons has been throughout his whole career in fantasy. But overall, this team has insane upside. If you had a fourth linebacker, you'd probably be a little bit higher on this list. But overall, for now, you're just at number 6, about middle of the pack. All linebackers with solid upside, but there are people that just have a better linebacker cores overall. Coming in at number 5, I have Rick Tatership. Rick Tatership has Levante David, Eric Kendricks, Leighton Vander Esch, and Bobby Wagner. Now, this linebacker core is pretty much the definition of solid. I think they're all going to get around their projected points on every week. I think the only one that has any upside to getting higher, though, is Eric Kendricks, where, as you remember, Drew Tranquill was in and did really good in the Los Angeles Chargers defense last year. Maybe Kendricks goes in and does really, really well. But other than that, I think they'll all be just very well-rounded players. None of them have really too much crazy upside or anything like that. They'll just be solid for you around. I don't think many of them have a chance of disappointing you unless somebody gets hurt or something. Coming in at number 4, we have Big Yawners. Now, Big Yawners has Devin White, Logan Wilson, Fred Warner, Jordan Hicks, and Tim Anderson. Pretty much it's the same situation as with Rick Tatership. I think all of these guys are very well rounded, but none of them really have too much crazy upside, except for Jordan Hicks, who is now going to be on a Minnesota defense without, well, Eric Kendricks, as you just saw, he went to the Chargers. So it's kind of the same scenario where you have 4 solid guys. One guy has a little bit of upside, but nothing crazy. I do really like Tim Anderson, though. I think he'll do really good by the end of the year. I think you got a steal there. Every linebacker that's been in Atlanta in terms of fantasy has usually done really good, whether you're looking at guys like Deion Jones, Foyesade Oluokun, whether you're looking at Rashad Evans, Michael Walker, it doesn't matter. They'll usually put up a good 15, 20 points per game. So just keep an eye on him. I think you'll end up starting him over one of your main starters by one of the later weeks. I think he'll do really good. It's pretty rare for Atlanta not to have a high-scoring fantasy linebacker. But overall, very good. Top 4 defense in terms of linebackers. And top 3 here were very tough to pick. I think these 3, there's a big drop-off between 3 and 4. 4 and 5, don't get me wrong, are very well-rounded, but the top 3 have like elite linebackers that kind of just split the difference. Coming in at number 3, I have Pussy. Pussy has Nick Bolton, Alex Singleton, C.J. Mosley, Patrick Queen, and Jawan Bentley. Now, Nick Bolton, I think, is going to be one of the best linebackers in the league this year. However, he does have a bit of a cap on his upside, and I think he might actually downgrade from last year just a little bit, just because he does have that Drew Tranquill coming in. Nobody knows exactly how much or how many snaps Drew Tranquill is going to come in and take from Bolton. So overall, I think he might be a little bit downgraded, but not too much. I still think he'll be one of those top 3 elite linebackers that you can't really get other than the top 3. C.J. Mosley is really good. I think he's going to do really good again this season, like he did last year. I think he'll be probably a top 10 safe bet for linebackers this year, but I don't think he's elite like, say, Nick Bolton, Roquan Smith, Foyesade Oluokun, for example. Alex Singleton, he should be good for a good 15 points per week. He's pretty good. I wouldn't say he's elite by any means, but he should be good for a good 10 to 15 points per week. I will say ever since Josie Jewell started playing in Denver, though, Alex Singleton did start to take a step back. So we'll have to see if that trend continues. But overall, there's no sign saying it will. We'll just have to wait and see. Patrick Queen, I'm actually not a fan of, though, just because they got Roquan Smith. And ever since he went in, Patrick Queen really didn't do much in terms of fantasy. He was just kind of sitting there with his thumb up his ass, occasionally go in, get a few stats here and there. But overall, if I were you, I would start Juwan Bentley at least for week one until you see what you're going to get with Patrick Queen. Bentley's probably going to be a lot more consistent throughout this whole year, even if you do see Queen starts doing good, unless Roquan Smith were to go down. If Roquan Smith goes down, Queen will be an instant start. He'll be really good. But unless that happens, I would actually start Bentley if I were you. That's just my suggestion, though. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty good linebacker core. A lot of upside, a shit ton of upside, actually. And yeah, let's move in on number 2. At number 2, we have PMC Wagner. PMC Wagner has Roquan Smith, TJ Edwards, Bobby Okereke, Josey Jewell, and Dre Greenlaw. And anyway, Roquan Smith, I don't think will have as good of a year as he's had in years past. Now, in Baltimore, he went there and he started playing for him. And obviously, he still did good after coming in from Chicago. For a few weeks, he actually was struggling to score any more than 10 total points per week for a few weeks, but that's just because he was going into a new system and all that. But I do think there is some concern, and that's in Chicago. The main reason Roquan was the best linebacker in the league was that he was getting tackles left and right pretty much on every single play, plus he'd make big plays happen, like the occasional interception, fumble, that type of thing. But he was a tackling machine. Whenever he went to Baltimore, I could be wrong, I don't think there was a single game where he had a combined total of over 8 tackles after he went to Baltimore. And I think the thing is, he's going to be a lot more reliant on those big plays, which I think are more likely being in a defense like Baltimore. But overall, he's going to need those to get to 20s every single game. I think he's going to be a lot worse than, say, Foyesade Oluokun and Nick Bolton this year. But that's just my opinion. I've been big on Roquan from the start, but I just don't think being on a Ravens team stacked with good defensive talent with tacklers is going to be great for him. Then you got TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards is another one that did really good last year, but he has the same issue as Tremaine Edmunds, where he's coming in from the Eagles and now he's going to the Bears. And as I already talked about with that Bears linebacking core, that whole defense scares me in terms of fantasy. What I mean by that is there's so many guys who are going to be sharing these tackles, stealing them off of each other. I don't see any of them being reliable in terms of fantasy, but we could see, and I might eat my words for that later on. But overall, he's still projected 17 points. I think he'll do worse than that, but overall, I don't think he'll be horrible. You have Bobby Okereke, who is a big heads or tails type guy. He's playing for the Giants. I think he'll be really good for those of you who remember people like Blake Martinez whenever he was on the Giants. Whenever the Giants have a good middle linebacker, he does really good in fantasy. I think Okereke's going to do really good for you. You also have Josey Jewell, who was actually one of the highest scoring linebackers in the entire league whenever he went in for Alex Singleton as the main middle linebacker. Overall, I'm a huge fan of him. I think the people that knew about him last year got big steals with him. I actually wanted him in pretty much all of my drafts this year. He was actually going pretty high in the rankings, though. A lot more people knew about him than I thought. And then you also have Dre Greenlaw, who actually is another one that had some of the highest scoring games per game whenever he's able to stay healthy. But the problem with him and guys like Fred Warner, for example, is they cannot stay healthy to save their life. Yeah, your Dre Greenlaw kind of has the problem my Devondre Campbell has, in the sense of they both could be amazing. I think it's more likely for Campbell, but yeah, I've yet to see Dre Greenlaw actually play a whole year healthy. But he does have really good upside, though, if he can stay healthy. Overall, both this and Pussy's team were very elite defensive linebacker cores. Coming in at number 1, I have Homeland Security, aka myself. I have Foyesade Oluokun. The reason I think I like Foyesade Oluokun so much more than Roquan Smith and Nick Bolton, which are pretty much the only 2 linebackers that are close to him, at least to kick off the year, is while you, like I said, Nick Bolton has Drew Tranquill coming in, so nobody knows how that's really going to play into things. That could take away a lot of his tackles. It might not mean shit. We'll have to wait and find out. I think he's going to have a bit of a downgrade, not too bad, but a little bit. And then, like I said, with Roquan, he's going to be having a little bit of a downgrade, I think, compared to Chicago, where he's going to be relying on those big plays. Meanwhile, Foyesade Olu, can nothing really change with that Jacksonville's defense. He's going to be making big plays, making left and right tackles like he did in years past. I don't see too much changing here. I really like Zaire Franklin. He was actually projected in the 20s at the ending of last season just because of how good he was doing. There is one problem, and that's Shaquille Leonard. As you see at the bottom there, I have him too, just in case. Um, is if Shaquille Leonard comes back, Zaire Franklin might start dropping off. However, in the games that Shaquille Leonard actually came back and played last year, Zaire Franklin really didn't drop off much. He actually did pretty much just as good as he did in years past, but it was a small sample size to work with, so we can only wait and see. I have Devondre Campbell, who who before getting hurt last year was actually ranked the number one linebacker in the league up until he got hurt, and the year past, even higher than guys like Roquan Smith, and before that, Nick Bolton wasn't really that big yet. Neither was Foyesade Oluokun, but still, at that point, Devondre Campbell was still the highest linebacker in the league. So he has the upside if he can stay healthy. So that alone, I think, is just making this linebacker core pretty elite. And then Cole Holcomb, I think, will be pretty consistent. The Steelers are the same thing. Whether you look at guys like, you can ask any Steelers fan, you look at guys like Miles Jack from last year. You can look at guys like Lawrence Timmons. You can look at guys like Ryan Shazier. These middle linebackers that the Steelers have been known to have always produce a lot of points every single season. They usually don't fail. You know what I mean? I've yet to see it, at least personally. It doesn't matter who they have in there. They usually make it work with really good linebackers. And then I also have Jordan Brooks. And now some of you might be wondering why I have him in like every league I'm in, pretty much. So I have him in pretty much every league I'm in. People aren't really expecting him to do much because Bobby Wagner went in, but he does have an insane level of upside where he was actually going to be one of the top 10 linebackers in the league, if not higher, if he didn't go on injured reserve in the last 3 games of the season last year. But with Wagner coming in, I'm aware he's probably going to have a bit of a drop off compared to how he's done in years past. But he does still have an insane level of upside for this later off season. And plus, and overall, I just think this linebacker core just has a stupid level of upside as it is. That's kind of why I've been wanting to trade overall, though, because it is risky. Because by week 4, I'm the first one to admit, full transparency, I think that there's a very good chance I could drop down like 5 spots on this list because, I don't know, guys might not be able to stay healthy. They might not be as good as I am expecting them to be. But overall, for now, I think it's a very good bet to put them at number 1. And that was the list. Like I said, guys, if you have any questions on recommendations, and it doesn't even have to be for this league, it can be another league if you guys want, where I could go through and look at your lineups, and if you have a question on who I would recommend, or on who I would recommend you start, something like that, or if you were looking at like free agent suggestions for a position, I could give you some of those. Just let me know, and I'll make a video on it later. See you guys later.